there kids, it's your good buddy Uncle Ben here with Premier Guitar to show you guys, you young shred-eye knights in training, some of my absolute favorite alternate picking speed strategies. These are really easy to understand phrasing concepts that you can apply to your 3-note per string playing today and start getting more fast, reliable, and vicious alternate picked licks. And the great thing about these concepts is you can apply them to any 3-note per string scale shape, which is kind of the basic food group of your average shredder. So it doesn't matter if you're using like a Lydian scale or a harmonic minor or whatever, you can apply these concepts. You can also take these same ideas and apply them to your 2-note per string pentatonic playing if you want to channel your inner Zakk Wylde or Joe Bonamassa and get some blazing hot licks through the old gin and tonic scale. Start applying these phrasing concepts to your playing and you're always going to have licks in your back pocket that you can rely on and play at blistering high speeds, even if you've not really practiced 10 hours and warmed up that day or whatever. These are things that are always good, reliable bets to have. And the cool thing is, if you try out these ideas and they're just not really working for you and they feel unnatural or something, I got 2 tricks at the end of this video that I'm going to show you that'll definitely get them working for you right away. So be sure to watch till the end. So without any further ado, let's talk about the secrets that are going to get you shredding faster than a cheetah in a speedboat. One last thing before we start talking about these ideas, just remember this is all a lesson on straight up alternate picking. What you want to reach for if you want that like machine gun, Paul Gilbert, or like Vinnie Moore style sound. We're not talking about economy picking today. We're not talking about mixing in legato. We're talking about the easiest ways to get really cool, shreddable phrases out of 3-note per string scale patterns while using strict alternate picking. Down, up, repeat. I'm going to be basing the majority of these ideas out of a good old 3-note per string C major scale. Looks like this. Okay, here's the thing about 3-note per string scales. They're great because they have a symmetrical number of notes per string that cover several octaves of a scale, and they're generally pretty easy on the left hand. But the biggest problem with them is whenever you apply alternate picking to them, something really difficult happens right away. Check it out. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. You'll notice as you go through a 3-note per string scale pattern that the picking is like inverted every other string. It just kind of flip-flops between being down, and up, up. Now that on its own is not really that bad, but whenever you start trying to play through these things at really high speeds, it gets really tricky because you're having to change strings after both downstrokes and upstrokes, and that can be a nightmare to navigate. But here's 2 bits of good news. For one, you should never be playing straight through scales in your solo anyway. That's the most boring thing you can do. It's really, really fortunate for us as guitar players that like the hardest thing to do, rapidly play through a 3-note per string scale, also happens to be like the most musically boring thing you can do anyway. So why practice it? We're never going to use it anyway, right? And the other bit of good news is that you can completely avoid that speed trap of the flip-flopping picking if you know the power of even numbers. Okay, so the flip-flop thing happens whenever we're using odd numbers of notes per string. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That made the picking kind of invert itself every time through there. But if you train yourself to use even numbers of notes per string whenever you're just burning it down, you can avoid all that entirely. Because as long as you're playing even numbers of notes per string, the picking never flip-flops. And you can use a little bit of mathemagic to help you through here, because one thing you might have learned in class way back in the day is that any odd number, like 3 times 2, equals an even number, right? So let's check out the power of 6s, which is something I use and overuse way too much in my shreddy stuff. But once you know the trick, you'll be hooked for life because it's so easy to do at really high speeds. Okay, here's the idea. 1, 2, 3, right? If I just play up those notes 2 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, that's a little bit easier to navigate through every string here, because if you'll notice, the picking on every string is now the same. Down, up, down, up, down, up. Next string is gonna go down, up, 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 down, up. We're only changing strings after upstrokes when we play this way. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. I guarantee if you practice that seriously for like 15 minutes, you'll be able to play that like 1.5 times faster than whatever your maximum of alternate picking through the scale is to begin with. I guarantee it. It's like the picking hand just has to do one thing and then copy and paste onto the next string as you adjust the fingering shape over here in the left hand. Really easy to get that going on right away. We can make sixes happen another way as well. Check this out. Because if I have these notes, I could reconfigure them in this pattern to get what I call alt sixes. Now, a good way to think about this is that every string has a low note, a middle note, and a high note, right? Low, middle, high. Think about this phrase as you play through it. Play low, high, and then walk down, and then walk up. Low, high, walk down, walk up. Try that a few times with me here. Low, high, walk down, walk up. Low, high, walk down, walk up. And again, I can take that through the strings. And it's musically a heck of a lot more interesting than just playing through the scale, and you'll be able to do it a lot easier and a lot faster. You can mix up those alt sixes with the regular straight sixes we talked about earlier too. Alt, straight, alt, straight, just to kind of change up your phrasing a little bit. That's kind of the problem with these like sequenced ideas. It's almost like a magic trick for the listener, where once you see the illusion and you know how it works, the whole trick is kind of ruined for you, you know? So if you just get really good at the sixes and you just abuse those and play them up and down all the time, it gets pretty predictable to the listener. So it's important to kind of change up your phrasing whenever you're doing this stuff. Now these ideas also work whenever you're descending through the scale instead. So again, instead of simply playing down the scale, which would be way harder and, again, more importantly, really boring. Seriously, nobody plays straight through scales in their solos. It's because it's dull and really hard to do. Instead, I could group those notes together in groups of sixes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, an odd number times 2 equals an even number, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Take that through the strings. You could even do the walking up, the ascending sixes. Or the low, high, walk down, walk ups that we talked about earlier too. That's a cool idea because you end up with a big interval gap in between the last note on the high string and the next note on the lower string. So the phrasing is a little bit more interesting there too. You could also alter that same idea. Instead of having low, high, walk down, walk up, let's invert all that stuff to make a descending version of the lick. It's gonna sound like this. High, low, walk up, walk down. High, low, walk up, walk down. That's definitely one of those frilly shirt patterns that you've heard old Yin Yang Milkshake play in his soloing as well. But of course there's other even numbers other than 6, right? What about 4? That's the next smallest even number. Okay, how do I make 3 notes into 4? There's a couple of different ways you could do that. You could use what's right there and simply change it up to where it's like this. Low, high, middle, high. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's giving me a 4-note phrase now. And again, the phrasing is changed up a little bit too. I think those are more challenging because there's only 4 notes on every string, then you have to move with the pick to the next string as you go through. It's not really as easy as the 6s. But again, you can mix up those 4-note phrases with the 6s that you've already mastered to get some really cool 10-note long phrases that kind of float across the beat in an unpredictable way. Again, hide the trick, right? It sounds something like this. 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. But of course there's even numbers that are more smaller than 6 or 4, namely the number 2. Okay, how can we get some 2s out of these 3-note per string phrases? I tend to just find myself using like the first 2 notes on a string to start a phrase. Let me show you what I mean. So like, let's say I played 6 notes on the first string. On the next string, I could simply play 2. And then I think of that as one complete lick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2. Now at that point, I'm kind of hearing this now as an 8-note phrase. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's try that again. So So then what I could do is start chaining those phrases together to create some really vicious 8-note long licks. That fits really great if you're playing something that's 16th notes, 1E and a 2E and a, you know? That's gonna fit nicely inside of the beat then. Now the cool thing is after you play that 8-note phrase, you can restart the same idea from the string you landed on. So check this out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now start over here from the A string. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Start over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that's how that same idea would sound descending through the strings instead. So again, we're keeping everything as even numbers, and it's minimizing how weird the string changes are going to be. Everything is always changing after an upstroke. So the thing about this is you need to have your picking kind of oriented so that the upstrokes are kind of popping out of the strings like that. You'll see right here that my pick isn't really following a straight line up and down through the strings. It's more set at a diagonal so that the downstrokes really chop into the strings and the upstrokes really jump out of the strings like that. Again, since all my string changes are happening after upstrokes whenever I'm using these ideas, it's going to be advantageous for me to play in such a way that my upstroke is getting away from the strings like what you're seeing right there. This downward pick slanting approach to alternate picking is exactly what you see players like Zach Wilde, Yngwie Malmsteen, Joe Bonamassa, tons of players use this approach. And if you know how to exploit it, that's when you're going to get the most results out of it. And get creative with it. Maybe there's some other ways to play 6s or 4s or even bigger numbers like 10s or 12s that I've not covered yet. Get creative and see what you can do with it. Okay, so let's say you've made it this far in the video and you've practiced these ideas some, but they're just not clicking with you. It feels like your right hand is kind of fighting you to do some of these ideas. Okay, there's two things that we can do here to make this work for you. Because as I said earlier, this is all kind of oriented around working with that picking style where the upstroke kind of escapes like that right there, right? But that's not how everybody plays. There's plenty other players who have an escaping downstroke style of picking like this. In fact, I would say most players that get a grip on like playing metal and stuff tend to play this way because of all the fast downstroke action you have to do when you're playing rhythm guitar parts from Metallica and Megadeth and stuff. So a lot of players out there have this tendency to not have an escaping upstroke, but rather have an escaping downstroke. Well, the good news is you can use all these same ideas if you just know two little tricks to make them work for you. And even if you are the guy who works really well with the escaping upstroke, learn this too because you're going to double your lick vocabulary. Okay, scope this out. The easiest thing I can tell you to do is just reverse the picking on everything. So let's say you were doing the 6s, right? Instead of starting off on a downstroke, which would have you terminating on an upstroke before you change to the next string, just start on an upstroke instead. Up, down, up, down, up, down. Then you can just copy paste that onto all the other strings. Up, down, 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 and so on. Just reverse the picking and work with your escaping downstroke to your advantage. But of course, sometimes starting phrases on an upstroke can be kind of awkward, especially if it's like landing on a hard downbeat. So maybe that's not working for you. Well, check this out. The cool thing is you can start any of these ideas out. The 6s, the 4s, the 12s, whatever it is, all these even numbered phrases. You can play all of these as long as you start with a single odd number. Okay, check this out. Let's say we began with 1, 2, 3. That's an odd number, right? Or even 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Any odd number. That's going to have you starting on a downstroke and then leaving on a downstroke. 1, 2, 3. Okay, down, up, down. Now play straight 6s on all the other strings. Down, up, 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 down. You'll notice now all the string changes are happening after downstrokes. This happens even if you play the smallest odd number, which is 1, right? So I could just simply play one note from the scale and then start playing up 6s. And now I'm playing that burn in 6s phrase, only it's working for my picking hand if I'm the kind of guy that gets away from the strings on downstrokes. It also sounds like a completely different phrase than just playing straight through a straight 6s, because you're hearing the downbeat here on the last note on every string rather than the first note on every string. Really cool stuff. So yeah, if the ideas aren't working for you, try reversing the picking Or don't reverse the picking and just start all these phrases out with any odd numbered grouping, and it's gonna flow like butter. So there you go, guys, some alternate picking speed strategies to get you guys shredding in no time. Try incorporating these into your high speed playing for about a week or so, and then let me know in the comments section how it's treating you and how they're working out for you. I guarantee, as long as you understand the power of the even numbered grouping and make that a priority in your really fast phrasing, and I'm pointing that out, really fast phrasing, because honestly, this stuff just applies whenever you're like breaking the law speed, right? We're only worrying about this stuff whenever we're playing really fast. Don't worry about these ideas when you're playing at slow and moderate tempos. You don't need to be grouping stuff into even numbers then. But when it's time to burn, try this stuff out, and I guarantee you'll have a lot of success with it. You guys have been fantastic. I've been Uncle Ben Eller here for Premier Guitar, and I've had a great time showing you these ideas today. Huge thanks to Premier for having me be a part of this, and thank you guys so much for watching. Now get away from the computer and go play some guitar. Less clicking, more picking.